Okay, dames en heren.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to start now with the afternoon session. We have started a little late, but the workshops were so very enthusiastic that we wanted to really rob and get the outcomes out of their hands. We are more or less coming back to a summing up. We have spent 2 days now for practical spirituality, spirituality above society, and the circle is more or less round. We have wonderment, philosophy, discipline, mysteries. We have covered more or less all the subjects which were necessary. And you have done your exercise, and now it's of major importance to make some additional steps. Discipline is in our society a point of discussion because we experience that in general as in a negative sense. You must adhere to rules and regulations. They're supposed on you from above, rules of the family, demands of partners, and so there are a number of elements from which we think this is what should we do with it. But we try nevertheless that discipline in a general sense is a very necessary element. If everyone would not take into account discipline, education would never come to an end, and you would not grow in experience, and you could not grow into an end result or a good situation. And as we are talking with taking in the element of mysteries, then we are together moving along that lane. And as we have told you today, what is compassion as such? Is that a choice? That depends a little bit on if you reconcile the first speaker of today, and if you were able to follow her logic, which to my opinion was very clear, then you could say very easy, it is as a bottom line, it is no choice. If everything is connected with everything else, and there can be only harmony and peace, if not somewhere in the overall world there is something else, then we could not only be so we should do all the things we do in the context of the totality. And if you try to consider what should you do, then you should say we have to develop this spirituality in support of harmony. And we want a harmonious society in the most broad sense. And then this shows, if you narrow this picture more or less, then you get differences, and it's just like the weather. As soon as there are high pressure and low pressure areas, there is a stream, a current between those, and then this delivers some nice, but also some not so nice elements. And then the next step of the initiation, there is and this we have covered with you on a not too difficult level, so that it comes out clear and in our. And the word initiation, you can look at that not only on the world level, but you can also consider it on the cosmic level. And that subject we did not address today, but the only thing I want to say with it that the initiation is also a trial on very high levels. So compassion, the laws of laws, And in that aspect may be very clear, but let's take into consideration, if we think that it is logical, that does not mean that we also are acting in that way, where there are a lot of things which are logical, and we do support the logic of it, but if the choice is before us and we look upon the consequences, then we are not willing to take those consequences, because there is something which has to do with our preferences and so on and so on. And this gives a certain indication. If on the same moment as you say this is logical, but you stand before the choice and you don't do it, then you have to conclude that your vision is not universally enriched enough to realize that at the bottom line it is not a choice, but by the limited situation of your personal preferences and spheres, and that you choice for a smaller constituency, and that is something that you need to realize, that you have to take the next step beyond that. We must learn to express it, to bring it into practice. Many Theosophic writers and philosophers say we must aim for unity and cooperation. But if you have followed our logic, then this unity is already there. It is a fact in nature, but we don't have to work on that. So the only challenge is, can we bring it into practice?
Another interesting point is the question, is it trainable? Yes, it is. If you follow the logic, you can find for yourself an impersonal motive, but the training is in the learning, looking through and applying the logic. The same moment when we do not realize, when we buy a t-shirt from €3, and I was walking through the city the other day and I saw a shop for lady wear, and I saw dresses for €5 and €6 and €7. You have to think only for 30 seconds to find out, come to the conclusion that it cannot be made for a salary as usual is in our Western society. The challenge is to be that consequent in your logic that you go to another store where you know that the dresses come from a place where workers are paid properly. Of course, you can argue, if I don't buy the dress for €5, these people are worse off. Of course, then we have to find a way to pay these people more. There was also an interesting remark from somebody, the different levels of compassion. Of course, there are several levels of compassion, because besides the logical consequences, you can argue yourself, how far do we have a vision, insight? So not only the intellectual powers, but the more power of insight to see that there is a compassionate view in the solar system, in the universe, and how you can imagine yourself and give it a picture. You can also say, I am very compassionate, but then you will be limited to your own family. Family and the universe, there's quite a difference between. Of course, you have to build a certain vision on that. You need a logic, and there are certain levels, and it is possible in practice that somebody with the best possible motive do something else where somebody else will think that can be done better. From your point of view, you can say that, but somebody else who is doing that has done a very high-level performance. And according to his insight, he has been the best possible according to compassion. What is the quality of somebody you can talk with? You don't talk about the motive, but you exchange the views that if you can say, if in the next time you do this or that, and perhaps you think better about the consequences, you better do this or that, then you probably arrive to a situation that the other will appreciate what you are saying and he will not question your. He has worked according to his best capabilities. It's become more difficult if you do not work according to your best possibilities and somebody tells you, why didn't you do that better? Of course, then he will, he has towards the personal side a legitimate part. So if you look at each other from a compassionate point of view, you will see a very stimulating atmosphere. And I can assure you in our working group, what has worked in our working group, that it was very pleasant, our meetings every Saturday morning. And if people were very sorry when they were not able to come and didn't feel it as a duty to come. Because what's better than exchange views and ideas in the light of compassion and to help each other to create a bigger picture about an ideal. And I hope today you have experienced something of that. What also was very nice, nice question, levels of compassion personally, very interesting. When you say personally and you talk about compassion, and if you come to the conclusion that compassion is then it's very difficult to take that from a personal motive. But you have to consider it from the most impersonal motive, as spiritual, as practical as possible.
Different circles and different circumstances. Yes, someone said, but in the circle of my friends, it's very easy to be compassionate. But with our neighbors, and quarreling, it's very difficult. So this is a typical unpersonal, above personal challenge. If you think that everything is connected with everything else, then you should your action in relation to your neighbor should also be in accordance with compassion. So one thing is important: compassionate does not mean that you should always, by definition, be friendly. It does mean that your starting point is the unity and the connection, and your situation and your acts should be taken into that background. And maybe you should have a serious conversation with your neighbors. So it shouldn't mean that you should give in, but you should invest in the vision of your neighbors to come to more universal insights. If you take all those elements and put them in order and have a good look at them, then you get to the action side, and then you could also say what I think is a very good definition. Discipline is the assertion of willpower, and it's usually understood to be synonymous with self-control. The exertion of willpower. And this morning we discussed how free will really is, and I hope that you have understood that in principle it's free, but that you make it smaller yourself by the layers you lay around it. And if you think I'm going to do a study, and this study takes 4 years, then beforehand you will realize that you have to work very hard for 4 years and invest much of your time in this to come to a result. This is discipline. Discipline in the sense as we like to use it. Not the discipline as is used in the military. Although in Theosophical, but I'll come back to that, there is a little element which we should take into consideration. You could talk about steadfastness, and you could take into consideration also what about free will and karma. And if you really do realize that this will is in principle completely free, and that you can make your own choices and acts, and that if you do not carry it out completely, this has karmic consequences. And this is not more karma than a cause and effect. If you go to a bank and you take a mortgage and you have to pay 500 euros a month, then you must realize that for the rest of the month you must do your utmost to realize that 500 euros. You could say, okay, this gives me less free time, but yes, that's true. But this is the contract you have adhered to. So you have perked yourself in there. And so if you take this vision as a starting point, and you take compassion as a starting point, and there are a number of people who have no other possibility than to act from this perspective of compassion. And last night we had a very good overview of this spiritual line from the Lodge of Wisdom and Compassion, who has been active to disperse this knowledge. And that's for those people. This was taken for granted that they put their lives and their efforts in the service of this activity, and this is not a sacrifice for them. And this is not a sacrifice. But if I had not chosen this way, also me myself, then I had a lot of things not so well understood as I do understand them now. So acting on the basis of compassion is a very clear approach in the path of growth. So it's not shrinking, but it's a boundary which you set for yourself, but it's a stimulant. This is a very nice one. Do we need laws? And we have taken them down with a undercast ladder. We need them with a capital, laws with a capital. If you read the Tao Te King, then one of the paradoxes says that it's an intelligent thing to do away with the laws. Does he mean that the Tao should not be and a cert Wu Wei, a book of famous Dutch sinologue, and said Wu Wei means not acting with a small capital and with a large capital. Acting in comparison with compassion. And if you work in that way, then you realize harmony, and then you do not realize small vortexes and substreams. So our country is these days stands for a decision: should we alter our present laws?
We're talking about laws for immigrants. We think it's normal that when you are compassionate, you host immigrants and refugees, and that you try to give them a place in your society, give them food, train them, give them homes to live, and many people do like that. At the same time, when you create a law and you make that punishable, and then you will have an ethical conflict with yourself, because there are all kinds of situations possible that we ourselves come in a similar situation, and then we would like to see ourselves that we are being helped and fed. This is a typical example where you have to realize yourself that morality and ethics are from a more universal and a bigger issue. If you develop ethics from a universal issue, you have to do with the universal rights of the men, and they are tuned already, so not perfect, but it's a good step in the right direction. So yes, we need universal laws with a capital letter, because these are actually the attitudes of nature. You can see everywhere the fact that the Earth is turning around the Sun is a law, and also the distance is a certain law, and it's very good that it is like that. But if you define laws which are against the big laws of nature, you have a problem. Mysteries. You can say that is a subject on its own. Why is motive that important? And why is the combination with discipline so important? It is actually that the motive, but we had made that clear to you, is about an important aspect, creating the result. If you think about mysteries and trials belonging to that, then it's the question, which is very important for the Lodge of Wisdom and Compassion. Why do they value that so much? And when you read that for the first time in the letters of the masters, you don't understand what it's mentioned there. It's mentioned there, very simple, that only those chelas will be helped in their development and will be initiated and will get the knowledge if their motive is compassionate. The Lodge of Wisdom and Compassion never accepts somebody without compassionate motive. So that's a discriminative motive. Why is that? But it's not. They accelerate their development. Other consciousness further than us do take important steps for that. They accept karmic responsibility for that. And you then will say, thank you very much, I understand, we go into nirvana and we will see when we leave that again. No, it doesn't work like that. From compassion for compassion. So that's a very important thought you have to keep in your heart. Why is discipline that important? There are two sides. If you are being trained, take the simple example of swimming. If you know the movements of swimming and you've learned and trained that, and you were thrown in the water, and you don't have the discipline to make these movements, you will drown. Exactly. So there is a reason to be consequent in these movements. In the whole question of mysteries, if the teachers are training you, and we see ourselves when we look at our students, and when the students do not understand very well the course, that's not a big problem. But the students who say, aha, they have the aha moment, they must have the discipline to say, oh, first I have to understand and choose for the motive, and otherwise, before building up the karmic consequences, where you cannot foresee the consequences. From that point of view, the teacher has a very high karmic responsibility, and he has to maintain that discipline, the student, before he understands what he's working on, and before he creates all kinds of negative problems and consequences. That is new developed knowledge can be very difficult, can be very dangerous, and it can be more dangerous than any weapons. So if you deal with that in a wrong way, for many lives you can have the consequences. When I.S.I.S had a conception with Metis for Athena, and when he got his thoughts about that was in this area, what will Athena do with the wisdom she will receive from the head of Zeus, etc.
Initiation is the accelerating process to acquire knowledge, and discipline is necessary for that. So discipline is necessary to take this knowledge into account. And Dr. GDP, I think in esoteric tradition, makes a very interesting remark, as he says, well, if you make a study of something, and there comes a certain moment that you says, aha, this is what I understand, then it can mean that you are for the coming couple of days just hanging on this subject, and then you think, hey, is this it comes together, and then there is a little piece of discipline training to overcome and to control that effect, that you're not hung up in the idea. You could also say initiation in the mysteries is a conscious invoked wonderment. And with chelas, this is a little bit further developed than with your co-fellows, in which they are completely unknown of. And this element of wonderment, they'll experience that. And the discipline and the training, they need to apply that. Let us rephrase that. They had to apply their training, not to get in bewilderment, and to act consequently, and to have this experience to stay on that level of area of spiritual area. And as a decision and trial has a certain effect there in this the final stage. The element of trial is also in the letters of the masters prominent present, and they say, hey, what's this? I study, I understand, and what do you mean trial? Because it's my decision what I do with this information and how I will apply it. It's not up to the masters. It's so in the light of the karmic consequences and responsibilities they take upon them. And in fact, the test, if you really have become who you say that you are, is this element of trial a very necessary element. And you can, very conscious, realize this for yourself. This is the example of the t-shirt or something else that you want to buy, or a certain way of helping your fellow man, and that you must realize yourself, you are here facing this choice, and in what direction do I go? So training, study is a very interesting element, but the practice is very essential.
So we have a whole line of examples from the workshops, and I will let them pass all of them, because it's very nice to see that what we talk about is not abstract, first of all, but it appears in the daily practice of life. But one thing beforehand, that's why motive has a question mark. You must really realize well that as someone who looks at it from the outside, it is not really possible to judge what the motive is of somebody. Because it can always, somewhere in this person, be something else than you would expect. And that is the reason why the element trial that I discussed before is such an important element. Of course, you know the example of Malala. Yeah? What would you do when you're in a bus in Pakistan and this bus is being stopped and the Taliban comes in with weapons and asks, who is Malala? Will you sit down, or are you going to stand up? You know that when you remain seated, then the whole bus is going to be killed. And if you get up, that you have a very good chance that you will be killed. Try to imagine for yourself, as a practice, as an exercise, how would I react? Then we have some lighter examples. Resto van Harte. It's a restaurant that works with volunteers only, where people can go to, And I think that you can pay for the meal what you like. And this is a very well-run restaurant. So that's also a very interesting challenge. And then there are activities like de goede buur, which means the good neighbor, which means that you help people in the neighborhood, people who need it. Then there's a foundation saved tools for the third world. But you can also imagine that from those ethical situations, what would you do then? To save someone and drown yourself, is that practical? There is an example of someone who saved 2 little boys, but he drowned himself. And then you come with the question, is this practical spirituality? Is this the way how to help the bigger whole? And that gives discussion. If you think about it, I cannot, for example, I can't swim, then you know that when you jump into the water, you don't have 2 but 3 problems. If you are a good swimmer, on the other hand, and you have a good faith in it that this can become a very good thing, then it is very logical that you will do the jump. And it, of course, has all kinds of karmic consequences. So, can you imagine that we live in a country where there seriously is an idea that if you don't help when somebody gets in the water and you don't help, that then you are breaking the law. If we are not prepared to help the bigger whole, you really don't know what you're going to put yourself through, if only the wetsuit and your wet papers. On the other hand, and I think it's a very good example of compassion, that is the Truth Commission in South Africa. Of course, everybody was afraid after the abolishment of apartheid, what is going to happen now? Terrible things are going to happen, but no, there was a Truth Commission that said, we leave the past behind us and we start all new again. This is a very theosophical or responsible way of handling things. If we start from reincarnation and karma, cause and effect, then we should not be, we don't have to punish people for their mistakes, because in nature they have already given the seeds for their own punishment. The only thing we should do, that we should help those people with the weak characteristics to let go of these characteristics. You should not behave towards someone else in this way. There has been quite a bit of discussion about this Truth Commission, but if you look at our own country, where we say now we can't punish hard enough, then there are many reports that say that this does not help. The only thing that helps is re-education. So reincarnation karma we don't need to punish. The Marshall Plan, where poor countries after the Second World War, like the Netherlands, Germany, France, Belgium and other countries, were in fact helped to rebuild their country. One of the reasons that the Second World War came into existence is that they did not do this after the First World War. And then you get that if you stay with your own views and your nationalism, then you don't understand it, incomprehensible. But you should realize that when you make someone so poor that he has no choice, and somebody promises cars and God knows what, then you get a very strange, then you can get this situation. And then the choice is made very quickly. Meditation. Mediation.
Is hetzelfde.
Is that the same? No, I don't think so. You know, in the light of compassion, I really should make a remark, kind of a nuance. If you do mediation in the light of compassion, yes, of course. If you do it in the light of But then we have less costs for process and lawyers, and it is very costly and time-consuming, etc., etc. And I really want to have a quick solution. Then really the motive is not very compassionate. And then it's not about solving a conflict at all. But if you mean mediation from the understanding of compassion and the unity of everything, then of course it's very clear that it is very useful. But mediation is not the only thing. When you have a conflict and you go to a lawyer with the other party, it's also when you are in a bus and two guys starting a fight. What are you doing? You do nothing and you look at it? Or do you ask the other people in the bus to help to make sure that it doesn't get worse? Try to talk to both parties to show them that fighting really doesn't give a solution. Fair trade.
Fair trade, exactly the same thing. If you apply fair trade, because the demand is so very big, then you could ask yourself, is it fair trade? But on the other side, if people do want to buy and because blood or something else negative is attached, then these are very interesting examples of fair trade and as a compassion element. Some additional ones. Return salary by high commissioners, CEOs. If you don't have a high salary yourself, you're in support of this activity. But if you do have a high salary yourself, then you will only accept as if your support of this society is speak for itself. You can only realize this if everyone should support with his full capacity in this society and deliver everything he can, then he is not compassionate. If you do have elements which are useful for the society and you don't bring them in, then you are shortchanging the society. So you should bring in whatever you can. So if there are unbalanced elements in the society with too high salaries, then it should be the situation that you would only take what you need for reasonable living and return the rest into the society. Some political parties were supporters, and some other people are gone out of that party because they do not agreement of that. And there are countries that where someone with a higher salary gets a higher fine when he is doing something wrong. He has a better education, better financial means, so he should be harder punished. So it's in Finland and some other countries they're doing that. Second chance. That's also a very interesting one. Someone in your environment does things completely wrong and is in your way, and this person says, "Okay, I'm so sorry. I've done it wrong, so I shouldn't have done this. But I do want to continue with our cooperation." Are we then able to continue this cooperation without remembering this element? And so we should see that not the human person, but only the act should be considered. And if you're going back into earlier incarnations, then one should think that he has something in his past that he does not like talk about it anymore. If you have to talk with a high official, like a major, are you nervous? And with a lower person, with a lower job, kind of job, not nervous? Or don't you maybe want to talk with this garbage cleaner or whatever low job? So I have personally more problems if the garbage collector is on strike than the major, and that gives me much more problems. So if he stops and he wants to use our toilet, and I said, okay, that's fine because I need what you're doing. The king of Germany was during the German occupation. He wore a star, and what was the consequence? All his government officials, and at the end of the day, all the Danish people. So the Jews could not be pinpointed and sorted out by the star that they were carrying.
Stropers trainen als boswachter. Dat is natuurlijk ook een hele aardige. Dat is natuurlijk iemand in...
Train poachers as rangers. Okay. That's very interesting thing. Not to let them do their own thing, but train them to do something that the whole system is working a little bit better. And Africa has a couple of examples where this principle is applied. It demands from the poacher as such a change in mentality. So he needs support, negotiation, and to take away the causes for poaching. And if someone has no income, has a couple of children who are hungry, then he is in need of a salary. So you need to take something to overcome that cause. So you see that on the basis of all kind of examples like this, that all of our 2-day spirituality conference was very practical, says Erwin said yesterday.
So the question, is spirituality practical, is actually, what shall we say, it is a pleonasm. It is a conflict in itself. It is obvious there is really nothing else than practical spirituality. And that brings us to the end of our 2-day practical spirituality symposium and the workshops that we did. For everyone who says, well, I'd like to see or hear this back again, that's possible via our website. You can find the links to see the videos again of the 2 days, also in English. So that gives lots of possibilities, and it also gives you the possibility to view again what did they say and what exactly have they meant to say. On the website, of course, you see lots of other interesting things. For example, the start of our new season, our activities in San Diego and in New York this summer. So if you are in the neighborhood somehow, then maybe you could come and visit there as well. And of course, you will find all our literature. What is resting now, leaves us now to thank all our guests for being here, because we think it's really compassionate to come and listen to us, because it is going to have an effect, as we know, in the long or in the short run. And I would very much like to thank all the co-workers of this symposium and also the technical people for their input, and not only today, because there have been many months and weeks of preparation before. Only the fact to get online all this resulted in 3 visits here with tests, and finally the 3rd time it started to work. If we would not have tested it, then it wouldn't have worked. But also the Symposium working group, we had a very nice working season with them, but we're not ready yet, because there are some people, I will see them on Saturday morning again for preparation in San Diego and New York. So this leaves me to say to you, have a nice holidays.
I'd like to thank our
home well.
guests from Germany and Sweden. We will see each other in short time, because the interconnection becomes stronger and stronger, so we have to make some visits, and we have to do some duties over there, to fulfill some duties. We are very happy with the contributions, and you have really enlightened us. Carol has shown us a tradition, and the questions already raised from very nice to see the historical side. What about the spiritual tradition, and how are the ideas developed? So we will see what it will bring in future. So, ik hoop u allen dus weer te zien.
I hope to see you again in the new season. Wish you a good trip home, good holidays, and goodbye.